dear to you all. This, I think, is going to be my first video in the new year. Let's go 2024. And this is my video on my 10 top 5-star reads of 2023. So first up we have this one. I don't know whether you can see that or not. And this is the Watkins book of English folktales. Now, when I started doing this channel, I found that I was woefully ignorant of, I was practically ignorant of the folktales that are in the country where I live. As a child, I was always more interested in the Greek ones. They were far more interesting. But having read this, there's so many, and England is just full of wonderful little folktales, some of which I've already used this book to make a video on. This is where I get some of my video ideas, and I highly recommend diving into folktale books. It's so interesting. In at number 9 is the Smoke and Mirrors by Neil Gaiman, and I took this on holiday with me last year to Santorini, and I loved reading this. It's a collection of 35 different twisted dark little tales, and I loved just curling up at the bar reading this thing. And I think my favourite was the last story in this book, called Snow Glass and Apples, which is a Snow White retelling, where it's from the stepmother's point of view, and Snow White is a vampire. Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Now from here on out, the top 8 books are all ARC reads, which I didn't realise at the time of putting this list together. But in at number 8 is Violent Nights and Midsummer Dreams by Quill and Crow Publishing. And I really, really liked this. This is a 9-story collection of retellings of some of Shakespeare's works, except with a dark little twist in it somewhere. And I really, really enjoyed reading this. From what I can remember, I think 2 of my favourites were the retelling of Romeo and Juliet and the marriage of Beatrice Messina. It was so refreshing to read Shakespeare retellings that sometimes you haven't read, you've never read, and you don't need to have read to enjoy this book, which I really, really liked about it. In at number 7 is The Queen is Dead by C.H. Folan, and this is yet another this is the second Shakespeare retelling on this list, but this is a retelling of Macbeth, except it is less of a Shakespeare retelling and more of a writing the historical inaccuracies of the Shakespeare play. Because this is from the perspective of Gruach, who eventually marries Macbethad and becomes Lady Macbethad. And I really, really enjoyed this. I could not put this thing down. There's so many ulterior motives and so many characters that if you've read the play or if you were forced to study it in school, you know these characters, you're waiting for them to pop up, but they never pop up in the way that you imagine them to pop up. And I really, really, really liked reading this, and I highly, highly recommend picking this one up. So in at number 6 is my first ever ARC read, which is The Quiet Stillness of Empty Houses by L.V. Russell. And to say I was sceptical going in, I'd never done an ARC read before. I could not have got better with this. This is amazing. It ticks all my boxes. Haunted houses, slow burn romance, just amazing. And this is what I call modern Gothic literature. I'm recording another video today where I go on a little bit of a rant already about what constitutes Gothic literature and what doesn't. This, to me, does modern Gothic literature at its finest, and that cover just gets me I like just to take it down and look at it every now and then. So before we go into the top 5, we have a few honourable mentions for some of the 4 stars that were just under the 5-star mark. And the first up is Blood Coven. This is another one published by Quill and Crow Publishing House. They just hit it out of the park for me last year. And this is a retelling, a reimagining of Little Red Riding Hood that incorporates witches, wolves, and a curse that stretches across generations. I really, really enjoyed this one. And this is the first book in the Bloodbound series. I think the second one is due to be coming out at some point this year. And the other honourable mention is Rituals and Grimoires. This is the first anthology I read last year. I think it was my second ARC read ever. And I loved reading this. I loved reading all the different stories from all the different authors. It is just a really, really, really magical read. So now we're getting into the top 5. And in at number 5 is The Secret of the Thistle. And this is part of the Fallen series. This is book 2. And I couldn't get enough of it. I can't get enough of this series. And as a second book in a trilogy, usually these kind of books are, you know, filler. They're quite boring. This is nothing of the sort. Because the world has already been established in book 1, the author didn't have to waste time refilling our brains with stuff that we already know. So we could dive in straight into the political edges, and that is what this book has more of, the political upheavals going on around our intrepid band. Honestly, if you love fantasy in a sort of dystopian Arthurian legend setting, I cannot recommend higher than this series. And the artwork is just amazing. I don't know whether you can see on here, but like there's like the main character here, and then there's the rain whites. I don't know whether you can see. I think you can see if I do sort of that way. But yeah, amazing. Now in at number 4 is Bitter Crown of Thistle by Alisha Galvan, and this was so not the kind of book that I would usually read. It is a psychological horror, and to say that it knocked it out of the park, I couldn't put it down. And as I was reading this book, I was cringing back because it's ugh. And this book has 2 different points of view. It has the point of view of Caroline Stolar, which is our main female character, and she has an almost idyllic life. But she has a very dark past, and she is about to go through some extremely traumatic events with our other main character and point of view, Raymond. And he is obsessive, he is a stalker, and he kidnaps Caroline and puts her in a glass cage box so that he can watch her. She can't see him, but he can watch her and he can do things to her, and it's told in extremely gritty detail. If you want to pick this one up, I would highly advise to check out the trigger warnings, because it's a wild ride and it takes you down some very, very dark alleyways. Oh so good. Oh so good. Now in at number 3 is another ARC read. Well, they're all ARC reads apart from number 10 and 9. And this is the first Fallen series book, Salt in the Wound. And I remember at the time this being such a surprise to me, because it's not something that I would usually go out of my comfort zone, which is horror, to read. But this incorporates Arthurian legend, a dystopian future, and fantasy. And it entwines them so cleverly that I was just hooked. And like with the second one, I was just hooked for the whole thing. It's just got an avid reader. And this is a tale of a band of friends who are on practically a treasure hunting journey, and they are intent on finding the lost treasure of the mysterious long-haired priest. And they find this in a ruined cathedral, which is right at the beginning of the book, so you know that it's just a wild ride from there on out. A lot of things happen in the first few pages of this story, and it takes you completely out of your perceived comfort zone and the way you think that the story is going to go. It's dark, it's gritty, it's certainly not a pillow book, like a comfort book. So loved it, so loved it. Loved it enough that I had to buy it. As with the arcs that are on this list, if I have the physical copy, it means I've bought it. I haven't been sent it. The arcs that I have read have all been digital. So me parting with money to buy something that I already have on my Kindle, you just know it's good, because I'm a Yorkshire lass at heart. I don't part with my brass at all. Now, coming in extremely strong at number 2 is The Pirate Queen. And this is the first book in the Queen of the Seas series. This is so hefty and big, just because when I ordered the hardback from Amazon, I didn't actually realise that I'd ordered the large print version, which is why it's so big and hefty. And this surprised me with how many boxes it ticked for me. I can't get enough of it. I think I've read it twice. Yeah, I've read it twice. I first read it as the arc, and then I reread it just as the book. And this is not some cutesy, bodice-ripping, Mills and Boon style pirate tale. This is dark. This is dark and gritty, and it goes to some very violent places. And the pirate crews in this are not just some background filler, they are murderous, dangerous, dangerous guys. And in this book you've got the pirate crew, there's a pirate island ruled by a queen, you've got vengeful Greek gods, mythical creatures, enemies at every turn, and of course, treasure. The hunt for treasure, a pirate's never-ending hunt for treasure. And I really like the character of Callisto. She is the pirate queen, and she's not some swooning Mills and Boon character. She is a pirate queen in every sense of the word. She is not above getting down and dirty and covered in blood and gore with the rest of them. I think there's a second one coming out, but I'm not quite sure when that one's going to be. If you like pirate stuff and you don't want it too cute, too sweet, highly recommend this one. Now, the number 1 spot, the number 1 5-star book of 2023, I loved everything about this book. There was not one page where I wasn't enjoying it. It is exactly my style, and that is this one. I got this on my Kindle as an ARC read, and this is one I signed up for because I read the blurb and I had to read it. And I am so glad I did. It is quite a meaty read, coming in at 558 pages, but I really, really liked this. I think I read this over a space of maybe a week or so. I couldn't get enough of it. It has lots of different point of view characters and more as you go through the book, but the main character is, of course, Jigglyspot, and he is a carnival-loving, cannibal-eating, demon-spawning, psychopathic clown. Honestly, it makes Pennywise look like a ballerina. I loved every minute of this. And if you're into horror, although there are trigger warnings, so take care of them, because this gets very graphic and uncomfortable in some of the situations, which you would probably expect from a book like this. Because even on the back, and it had this on the arc bit, it has the warning of that this book contains scenes with profound psychological suffering and graphically violent acts, behaviours, thoughts, deeds and ridicule. No one has been spared and no label is safe. Although we are proud to report no animals were harmed during the writing of this novel, so that's a good thing. Everyone else is fair game. After all, if you were a demon, what would you think of humanity? And believe me, we're not thought of very highly. But I highly, highly recommend diving into this, because it was so much fun. So every book that I've listed here today, including the honourable mentions, I'm going to leave a link to their Amazon page down below. And if you want a more in-depth review of some of these books, I'll either add in the links to the videos for these, or I will put them up in the corners of this video. And for those that I haven't done a video on, you can get the more in-depth reviews if you click on my Goodreads link, which is in my YouTube profile. So if you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what your top books were of 2023. And as always, keep reading.